You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
Rewind 93.9 WYEC, Mid-Morning in the Cities. I'm Sean Patrick, and it is my honor to be joined by former Secret Service agent, now author, Clint Hill. His new book is called Five Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, written with Lisa McCubbin. Mr. Hill, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
This book and your life is extraordinary. You were there with Eisenhower, you were there with Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. So many things that must stand out for you. What drove you to write this book specifically?
Well, I had written two previous books, Mrs. Kennedy and Me and 5 Days in November, and then people wanted to know what happened to me after that, or what my career was really like, that I was an agent not just with the Kennedy family. And so the publisher and my co-author, Lisa McCubbin, and I decided that it would be worthwhile to write this book because it's a historical period of time, and we think the people should have as much information about it as possible.
Eisenhower is a fascinating guy because there are many stories about him really never wanting the presidency initially, but then reluctantly taking on that mantle. What was it like for him?
Well, he really wasn't a politician. He was a general. And he, as you said, he didn't really seek the office. It kind of sought him. And he did very well in the office. But he was a very prompt, precise individual to work with. He was very scheduled, up at early in the morning, to the office at 8, lunch at 1, and if you gave him a schedule and you said to be in the car at 9:30, he was in the car at 9:29.30, ready to go. And it was very easy to work with because he kept everything so close to schedule. He was well liked by both Americans and all the way around the world, and that made it much easier for us.
Did things loosen up a little bit when Kennedy came into office?
Well, when Kennedy came into office, now we went from a 70-year-old grandfather to a 43-year-old father of a 3-year-old girl and a pregnant wife who gave birth after Kennedy was elected, as a matter of fact. He was elected on November 8th, 1960, and young John wasn't born until the 25th. So, there was a big difference right there. And then the attitude of the individual. Eisenhower had surrounded himself with some senior people, military generals like Homer Grunter and others. And Kennedy surrounded himself with people like the Irish Mafia from Boston, Larry O'Brien, Kenny O'Donnell, Dave Powers. And so there was a different approach to the problems of life that they had to deal with, the problems of the country and the problems internationally.
It is unquestionably my honor to have former Secret Service agent Clint Hill, the author of Five Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, as my guest today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. We'll continue this conversation after this. Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9.
Just the right station for cruising down Avenue of the Cities. The Quad Cities' greatest. Rewind 93.9 WYEC. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
We're talking today with author Clint Hill, of course, former Secret Service agent to 5 presidents, including Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford in his time with the Secret Service, written, of course, extensively over the years about his time with the Kennedy, and, of course, about the Kennedy assassination. Clint, I won't have you rehash those stories because you've told them so often, but there is a story in the new book, Five Presidents, you talking about the Zapruder tape, and specifically seeing yourself over and over and over again on that tape. Talk about that experience.
Yes, that was I'd just been assigned a different position, and they decided to use me as much as they could to explain what had happened in Dallas, going over the Zapruder film with the new agents as they were being trained. And that was very difficult for me to do emotionally because I kept seeing the same thing all the time and, watching this man be killed right in front of me.
Powerful story, of course, in the book is called Five Presidents, Clint Hill and with Lisa McCubbin. And let's talk about President Johnson. You talk in the book about him basically being in a virtual prison inside the White House during these violent Vietnam protests.
Yes, it was very disturbing to witness all these protests that occurred because of Vietnam War, and it caused him to limit the amount of exposure he had, where he normally would like to be out and amongst the people, but because of the attitude of the people about the war, it was impossible for him to do that as much as he wanted, and so he did somewhat confine himself to the area of the White House itself or at the LBJ Ranch in Texas. We spent a lot of time at the LBJ Ranch.
Everything seemed to just weigh on him, from the specter of Kennedy to the civil rights movement. But how did he deal with all that pressure?
Well, that's what it gradually just wore him down, and that's why he eventually said that he wouldn't accept the nomination and wouldn't run again for the office of president. That was strictly because of his just being inundated with the problems of Vietnam, and it just wore him out, really. He was a very tired man when he left the office.
Former Secret Service agent, now the author of his third book called Five Presidents, My Life with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. He is our guest today on Mid Morning in the Cities, and we'll wrap things up next. Mid Morning in the Cities presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
Just the right station for cruising down Avenue of the Cities. The Quad Cities' greatest. Rewind 93.9 WIEC. You're listening to Mid Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WIEC.
Secret Service agent Clint Hill is our guest today on Mid Morning in the Cities, former Secret Service agent to Five Presidents, which is the title of his new book. Five Presidents, My Journey with with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, Johnson, and Ford. And an incredible book, sir. And, of course, I want to talk about President Nixon and, of course, Watergate. What was your perspective as that story was unfolding?
Well, initially, I didn't think that Watergate was going to be anything that really affected us. I received a phone call shortly after it happened and the arrests had been made. And they told me who had been arrested. And I then turned and gave that information to a supervisor of mine. And he recognized one of the names on that list as having worked for CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. So from that point forward, we knew there had to be a relationship between what happened at the Watergate and at least members of the White House staff, some members somewhere. And it just grew and grew, and then it all seemed to lead to the Oval Office. And things just got worse and worse. And then eventually, some of the members of the presidential staff had to resign, and some were fired.
Did this place the Secret Service at odds with the administration?
I don't think we were ever at odds with them. We tried to create an environment which President Nixon could function as president, and I think we did that right up to the end. We understood that maybe the problem was within the staff rather than with him, but although he seemed to have kind of a split personality, and he liked to do things without really too much advice. He would make a decision. And so it was not real unusual to find out at the end that he had, because of something he initially did, not in the Watergate case, but in something before that, the Ellsberg case, the people who were involved in Watergate thought it was perfectly okay to do what they were doing.
Of course, we're out of time now. We won't be able to get to any Ford stories, but there are plenty of great Gerald Ford stories in this book. My 5 Presidents, My Extraordinary Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. Clint Hill, former Secret Service agent, has been our guest. And Mr. Hill, it's been an honor, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
Former Secret Service agent Clint Hill has been our guest today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. His new book with Lisa McCubbin is called 5 Presidents, My Journey with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford is available now. You can check it out, and definitely a great read, especially if you love presidential history. I'm Sean Patrick. Mid-Morning in the Cities, presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
Just the right station for cruising down Avenue of the Cities. The Quad Cities' greatest. Rewind 93.9 WIEC.